Sometimes life takes a sharp turn when you least expect it. For me, it happened in the short 20 seconds it took the elevator to climb from the first floor to the 7th, that Sunday afternoon. I carried the heavy grocery bags, roast ingredients for dinner with my granddaughter. Everything was calm, predictable, almost dull. The elevator hummed, its mirror walls reflecting my tired smile. Then, on the 4th floor, the door slid open. A man stepped in, my new neighbor. Leonard Evans. He was in his early 50s. Polite but quiet, the kind who nodded instead of talked. Usually, he had an easy smile, but today his eyes were fixed on the floor. His breathing was shallow, his hands trembling slightly. Before I could ask if he was okay, he brushed past me and pressed the button for the 7th floor. The doors began to close, and that's when he slipped something into my hand, a folded piece of paper. 4 times folded. His fingers grazed mine, cold, urgent. He didn't say a word, only moved his lips soundlessly, like a ghost whispering a prayer. Then, in a breath so low it was almost air, he said, "Don't speak. Just read it." I looked down. My pulse quickened as I unfolded the paper. It said only 7 words, "Pretend to be sick. Leave immediately." At first, I thought it was a prank, ridiculous, but when I glanced up at Leonard's face, pale, strained, haunted, I knew it wasn't. Something was very wrong. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I clutched my chest, gasping, "Oh no. I don't feel well," I mumbled, stumbling against the wall. Leonard hit the emergency button. The elevator screeched to a stop between floors. He wedged his hands into the door gap and forced it open, just enough for me to slip through. "Go, Mrs. Sterling," he hissed. Now, I didn't think, I just moved. My bag spilled, apples rolling across the floor. I scrambled into the hallway, breath trembling. As he stayed behind, our eyes met once, one final second, and in that look, I understood he wasn't trying to scare me. He was saving me. Before I continue, if you enjoy mysterious true life stories like this one, take a second to subscribe and drop a like. It helps me know you're here, following along. Now, let's get back to what happened next. Within minutes, sirens filled the street below. Blue and red lights flashed across the windows. Police cars, an ambulance, neighbors poured into the hallway, whispering, peeking from their doors. Someone said the elevator was stuck between floors. Another shouted they saw blood. I stood frozen by my door, heart hammering. My groceries lay forgotten on the floor. What had Leonard been trying to warn me about? A loud knock snapped me out of my daze. "Mrs. Ollier Sterling?" a police officer asked, his tone clipped but polite. "Yes," I said, still shaking. "What's happening?" He exchanged a grim glance with his partner. "Mum, did you know the man who was in the elevator with you?" My stomach turned to ice. "Yes, he's my neighbor. Leonard Evans, is he?" The officer lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry, ma'am. He was found deceased when paramedics arrived. Deceased." The word hit me harder than I expected. My throat closed, but I just spoke to him. "He was alive 10 minutes ago. There are signs of an attack," the officer said softly. That night, I couldn't close my eyes. Every time I tried, I saw Leonard's face. The fear, the urgency. And that note. At 2 a.m., I turned on the bedside lamp, unfolded the paper again. The edges were damp with sweat from my hands. I traced the handwriting over and over, until I noticed something faint written on the back, a second message. Barely visible under the light. "Don't trust anyone in this building." My chest tightened. What did he mean, anyone? I'd lived there over 30 years. I knew every voice, every knock, every neighbor's habit. There was Doris from the 5th floor, always borrowing sugar. The Peterson twins, arguing day and night. And my daughter-in-law, Kieran, who lived upstairs with my son, Danish. For a moment, my mind stopped on her name. We hadn't spoken since our fight over my late husband's inheritance. Could Leonard have meant her? No, I shook my head. Impossible. But the seed of doubt had already been planted, and it refused to die. The next morning, the police came back. They asked why Leonard had passed me that note. If we'd known each other well, I didn't know what to tell them. Maybe he mistook me for someone else. Maybe it was coincidence. But deep down, I knew it WASN single quotes T. Leonard knew me. And he'd died minutes after trying to save me. When the officers left, silence filled the apartment like fog. The elevator remained out of service, its door sealed, warning tape stretched across. And in that heavy silence, one thought kept echoing in my mind: if Leonard warned me to leave, then someone in this building wanted me gone. The morning after Leonard's death, the building didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage. Every door a curtain, every voice behind it an actor pretending to be someone else. I'd lived there for 3 decades. I knew its sounds: the hum of the boiler, the clack of the mail slot, the faint dripping from the pipes near my window. But that morning, everything sounded different, heavier, watching. When I stepped into the hallway, the air was thick with silence. Yellow police tape still fluttered around the elevator, and an officer guarded the area. His radio crackled softly, static, then whispers. I wanted to ask what they'd found, but fear glued my tongue. Instead, I went downstairs to collect my mail. Halfway down, I noticed something that froze me mid-step. A dark stain, just a small one, on the wall beside the stairwell. Brown, uneven, almost invisible unless you looked closely. I reached out. My fingers trembled. It was dry, but unmistakably blood. That night, I told myself not to imagine things. Leonard's death had shaken me. Anyone would be jumpy. But when I sat for dinner, I realized I'd set 2 plates instead of 1. Habit, I thought. My husband used to sit there. But the knife beside his plate was turned upside down. I hadn't done that. Later, I phoned my son, Danish. He sounded distracted, the kind of distracted that hides something. Mom, maybe you should stay with us for a few days, he said. Kieran's been saying you've been alone too long. Alone. The word stung. I told him I was fine, but he insisted. We'll come by tomorrow morning, he said. We can all have breakfast. He hung up before I could answer. At midnight, I heard a knock. 3 slow taps, like knuckles counting seconds. I hesitated before opening the door. No one, only a slip of paper on the floor. Identical to the one Leonard had given me. Same folds, same handwriting. My breath caught. I unfolded it carefully. Stop talking to the police, that was all. No signature. No explanation. I felt my legs weaken. Someone knew what I'd said yesterday. Someone was watching me. Before I continue, remember, not every story ends the way you expect it to. Sometimes the truth hides behind the people you trust most. If you're still with me, make sure you've hit that follow, because what happens next still haunts me today. The next morning, Danish arrived early, earlier than I expected. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept. Kieran followed, dressed perfectly as always, her perfume cutting through the stale hallway air. They brought breakfast. Waffles, fruit, orange juice, too perfect for a spontaneous visit. While we ate, I mentioned Leonard's note. Kieran's fork paused mid-air. Note, she repeated. What note? Her voice was light, but her eyes flickered for half a second. I noticed when I told them about the second note, the one that appeared at midnight. Danish frowned, but Kieran didn't look surprised. Instead, she smiled softly. You've been through a lot. Ma, maybe your mind's mixing things up. That smile, too calm, too deliberate. After they left, I sat at the window, watching them walk toward the parking lot. They spoke in hushed tones beside the car. At one point, Kieran looked up straight at my window, and for a moment, her smile dropped. I quickly stepped back behind the curtain. That evening, I decided to go through Leonard's obituary online. His death had been ruled accidental, complications during a cardiac event. Accidental, but I'd seen his face. I'd heard his breath. He hadn't looked like a man dying of a heart attack. He'd looked like a man running from something. Scrolling further, I noticed something odd. A small note under family contacts listed his emergency next of kin. Deet Sterling, same building. My hand went cold. That was my son's name. I called Danish immediately, voice trembling. He sounded confused, or pretending to be. "Mom, I barely knew the guy," he said. "We talked once about the parking slots, that's all. Then why would he write your name down as next of kin?" Silence. Finally, he said, "Maybe it's a mix-up. Don't worry about it, okay?" But I couldn't stop worrying. That night, I barely slept. The building creaked and groaned, as if whispering secrets through the pipes. Every sound felt amplified, the drip of water, the hum of lights. The faint scrape of someone's shoe in the hallway. I peeked through the peephole once, and nearly screamed. Kieran stood there in the dim light, facing my door. Not knocking, just standing. When I blinked, she was gone. The next morning, there was another note under the door. This one wasn't folded, just a single torn page, scrawled in haste. "They know you read the first one." I felt my knees buckle. My vision blurred. Who were they? And what did Leonard know before he died? When fear lingers too long, it stops feeling like fear. It becomes routine, like breathing in smoke, pretending it's air. For the next 2 days, I tried to act normal. I cooked, cleaned, even watched my favorite afternoon show. But my mind was somewhere else, trapped in the memory of Leonard's eyes in that elevator. That silent warning. That note that saved my life. And then, something happened that made my blood run cold. Late Thursday night, around 11:40, I heard a soft clink from outside my door. Like metal brushing metal. The kind of sound a key makes when it misses the lock. I tiptoed closer, heart pounding. Through the peephole, I saw a shadow, a man, tall, wearing a hooded jacket. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just crouched near the door handle, doing something with it. When I whispered, "Who's there?" the figure straightened up and vanished into the stairwell. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went to the building manager's office. Her name was Martha. She'd been here as long as I had, always cheerful and nosy in equal measure. When I told her about the man at my door, she frowned. "That's strange," she said, flipping through her maintenance logs. "No one reported any repairs last night." "You sure it wasn't your son? He was here yesterday, wasn't he?" I didn't answer. She looked up at me then, lowering her voice. "You know, Leonard had been complaining too. Said someone kept entering his flat when he was out. He even asked me to change his locks last week." I froze. "Did you?" She hesitated. "No, he cancelled the request the next morning. Said he'd taken care of it himself." That was the moment I decided to go into Leonard's apartment. I knew it was risky, maybe even illegal. But I couldn't shake the thought that the answers were there, across the hall, waiting in the silence. So that night, when most of the tenants were asleep and the hallway lights dimmed to a sleepy yellow, I picked up my spare keys and quietly stepped out. The door to his apartment was sealed with police tape, one long strip diagonally across the handle. My heart hammered as I stared at it. Then I noticed something odd. The edge of the tape near the bottom had already been peeled and stuck back. Someone else had been here. I slipped inside. The air was thick, that stale mix of dust and disinfectant left behind after a clean-up. The curtains were half open, letting in the faint orange glow of the SDREETLIGHT. It looked normal at first glance. Furniture neatly arranged, nothing broken. But it felt wrong. Too neat, too clean. Like someone had erased the mess, not of things, but of truth. Then, on the coffee table, I saw it, a notebook. Its cover plain black, a corner torn. I hesitated before touching it, half expecting someone to grab me from behind. But when I flipped it open, I found pages filled with tight, slanted handwriting, Leonard's. Each entry was dated, some weeks old, some just days before he died. I skimmed through the lines until one sentence made me stop breathing. If anything happens to me, tell Olia Sterling she's not crazy. They're listening through the walls. I dropped the notebook. Before I continue, remember, every story you hear online hides another version underneath. If you're still following, don't forget to subscribe. Because what I found next changed everything I believed about my own family. I picked up the notebook again, hands trembling. The next page was half torn, but I could still make out fragments. Recorded conversations. Hidden microphone near the vent. Her son involved, payment confirmed. My breath hitched. My son, I read it again, slower this time, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the words didn't change. I turned toward the living room vent. It was small, square, and coated in dust. I stood on a chair, unscrewed it with a butter knife from Leonard's kitchen, and there it was, a small black device, no bigger than a coin. A recorder. The red light was blinking. It was still on. I nearly dropped it in shock. Someone had been listening. To Leonard, to me. Maybe to everyone in this building. I wrapped it in tissue, shoved it into my coat pocket, and left the apartment, locking it carefully behind me, back in my home. I placed the recorder on the table, staring at it like it might explode. For hours, I couldn't bring myself to press play. Finally, around 3 a.m., I did. At first, all I heard was static. Then, faint voices, muffled, distorted. Kieran's voice, she's getting suspicious. Leonard's note ruined everything. A man, we'll handle it. The old woman won't talk. Then, clearer this time, my son's voice, Danish, don't hurt her. She's still my mother. The recording stopped there. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. Tears blurred my vision, and the world seemed to tilt beneath me. My son. My only child. The same boy I'd raised through storms and sleepless nights. Was part of this. What was this? The next morning, I called the police again. But before I could explain, the line went dead. When I tried to dial again, there was no tone. Just silence. I picked up my phone to check the wires and saw it. A thin red mark on the phone cord, clean and deliberate. Someone had cut it. And then came the knock. 3 times. Slow, familiar. I turned toward the door, heart hammering. Who is it? No answer. Then, a voice I recognized, calm, sweet, and utterly terrifying. It's Kieran. Ma, we need to talk. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. Kieran's voice on the other side of the door sounded calm, almost gentle, but every syllable pressed against my ribs like a weight. I looked at the phone again. Its cord hung useless and limp. Whoever had cut it knew exactly what they were doing. Maud, are you there? I swallowed hard. Why, yes, I'm here. Please open up. Danish is worried. We just want to check on you. Her tone was sweet, rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. I crept toward the door, my bare feet silent on the floorboards. The peephole framed her face in the yellow hall light, eyes wide, mouth curved into a perfect smile. But someone else was standing just beyond the edge of the peephole's view. A shadow, tall, still. Come on, Ma, she coaxed. It's cold out here. I didn't answer. I backed away, slow and careful, until my calf hit the coffee table. The small recorder still sat there, wrapped in tissue, for a moment. I thought about hiding it somewhere safe. Then I realized nowhere in this apartment was safe anymore, when the knocking came again. Louder this time, I whispered to myself, think. Alia, think. The balcony. It connected to the next unit over, Mr. Patel's place. He was traveling for work. He'd given me a spare key years ago to water his plants. If I could reach that balcony, I could slip out unseen. Before I tell you what happened next, take a breath. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's what really happened that night. If you're still here with me, hit that follow, because from this moment on, every second mattered. I grabbed my coat, shoved the recorder into the pocket, and crept to the balcony door. The glass squeaked faintly as I slid it open. Outside, the night was heavy and wet. Rain drizzled from the roof gutters, tapping on metal like a ticking clock. I climbed onto the narrow ledge, gripping the cold railing. My apartment lights cast a faint glow behind me, and through the thin curtains, I saw Kieran step inside. She'd opened the door. How? I froze, half outside, half in. "Ma," she called softly. "Don't hide, please." Her voice echoed down the hallway. From where I stood, I could see her silhouette moving through the living room, slow, deliberate, searching. Then she stopped at the coffee table. I held my breath. Her hand reached out, found the tissue-wrapped bundle. The recorder. She unwrapped it, stared at it, then turned it on. A second later, Leonard's recorded words filled the room, his warning. The voices, Danish's desperate plea. Kieran's head snapped up. She looked toward the balcony. "You shouldn't have listened to that," she said. Her tone had changed. Softness replaced by steel. I stepped fully outside, gripping the railing tighter. The drop below wasn't far, maybe 12 feet to the small garden behind the building. But for someone my age, one wrong step meant broken bones or worse. "What did you do to him?" I asked through the glass. Kieran tilted her head. "Leonard," I nodded. "He was nosy. He found out things he shouldn't. He thought warning you would make him a hero." She smiled then, a small, chilling curve of satisfaction. "But heroes die, Ma. Didn't you learn that from all those bedtime stories?" I felt a sob rise in my throat. "And Danish. Was he part of this too?" She didn't answer. She simply pocketed the recorder and walked toward the kitchen, the same kitchen where the phone cord hung cut and frayed. I turned toward Mr. Patel's balcony. The gap between the two was just wide enough to terrify me. Rain slicked the railing, the metal cold and trembling under my hands. I climbed onto it, whispering a prayer under my breath. One step, then another. Behind me, I heard the balcony door slide open. "Don't do that, Ma," Kieran said quietly. "You'll hurt yourself." Her words were gentle again, but her shadow stretched across the wall like a blade. "Come back inside. We can talk." "About what?" I hissed. "How you killed Leonard. Or how you're planning to kill me next." Lightning flashed, and for a moment, her face lit up like a photograph. Calm, expressionless, beautiful in a terrible way. "No, Ma," she said. "I don't want to kill you. I just need what you have, what I have." "The second recorder," she said softly. "Leonard made two." The rain thickened. My hand slipped on the railing. I leapt. For a terrifying heartbeat, I was suspended in air. Then I crashed onto the next balcony. The impact knocking the breath from my chest, pain shot through my shoulder. But I was alive. Behind me, Kieran shouted something I couldn't hear over the storm. I scrambled to my feet, unlocked Mr. Patel's sliding door, and stumbled inside. The apartment was dark and silent except for my ragged breathing. I sank onto the couch, shaking. My shoulder throbbed, my knee screamed through the wall. I heard Kieran's muffled voice. "Come again, you can't hide forever. Ma, we'll find it." That night, I stayed hidden in Mr. Patel's apartment. Every creak made me flinch. I tried to call the police again, but my phone battery was dead, and the charger, of course, was still on my kitchen counter. At dawn, I finally dared to look outside. The hallway below was empty. My apartment door stood ajar. Someone had been inside all night. When I returned hours later, sunlight streaming through the windows, everything looked untouched. Too untouched, the groceries, the books, the photos, all in their places. But one thing was missing. Leonard's original note, the one that started it all. That evening, I checked my coat pocket for the recorder Kieran hadn't found. It was still there, the second one, smaller. With a cracked edge, when I pressed play, Leonard's voice filled the room again. Faint and distant. "If you're hearing this, it means the building isn't safe. They're using it. The walls, the vents, the wires, all of it. Don't stay." The recording ended with a click. For a long time I sat there in the dark. The city lights blinking outside my window. Then I made my decision. It was time to leave, but not before finding out why Leonard had died for me. When the sun rose the next morning, I'd already packed. Not much, just what I could carry in one duffel: clothes, my husband's old photograph, Leonard's recorder, and a few crumpled bills from the coffee tin above the stove. The building was silent, too silent for mourning. Usually I could hear the Peterson twins fighting about cereal or Doris humming gospel downstairs. That day there was nothing. Even the pigeons on the windowsills were gone. I opened my door and stepped into the hall. My shoes sank into the carpet, and the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner fresh. Someone had been scrubbing. At the far end, near the elevator still sealed with police tape, a man in a dark jacket was kneeling by the electrical panel. When he looked up, I saw the badge on his belt. A police badge. Relief flooded me. Finally someone official. Someone I could trust. "Officer," I called softly. He turned. His eyes flicked over me, quick, sharp, calculating. Then he smiled. "Morning, Mrs. Sterling. I was told you'd be leaving town." The words froze me. "Who told you that?" He stood up slowly, closing the panel door with a metallic click. "Your daughter-in-law, ma'am, said you'd be staying with family. Double quotes KIRAN. The relief inside me curdled into dread. I backed away, keeping my voice steady. I changed my mind. That's unfortunate," he said, stepping closer. "The department still needs a few statements from you. Why don't we go downstairs together?" His hand rested near his belt, not on his gun, but close enough for me to notice. My pulse hammered. Something in his tone, in the way he blocked the hallway, told me Leonard had been right. "Don't trust anyone in this building." "I'll get my coat," I murmured. I turned, ducked back into my apartment, and locked the door. Then I ran. The fire stairs were my only option. I slipped out through the kitchen exit and into the narrow stairwell that reeked of metal and old paint. Every footstep echoed like thunder. Halfway down, I heard the stairwell door above creak open. Boots clanged on metal. He was following. I tightened my grip on the duffel and descended faster, skipping steps, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give out. When I reached the second floor, I burst through the landing door and into the laundry room. Rows of washers lined the walls. The air was warm and smelled of detergent. I hid behind a dryer just as the stairwell door opened again. The officer's voice drifted in, low but distinct. "Mrs. Sterling, it's dangerous down here. Let's not make this harder." His tone wasn't police anymore, it was predator. I crouched lower, clutching the recorder. Leonard's warning echoed in my head. "They're using the walls, the wires, the vents." Then I saw it above the washers, a thin metal grate leading into the ventilation duct. I climbed onto the machine, pried the cover loose, and crawled inside. Before I go on, let me pause. You think you'd know what fear feels like, but true fear is soundless. It's the moment you realize even breathing might give you away. If you're still listening, stay with me, because the next few minutes nearly cost me everything. The duct was narrow, scraping my knees as I moved. Dust filled my throat. I could hear footsteps below, faint and hollow. I kept crawling until I reached a junction that split left and right. To the left was the boiler room dead end. To the right, if I remembered right, led toward the basement garage. I took the right. The metal groaned under my weight, echoing through the vent like whispers. Then, from behind me, a metallic clang. He was inside the duct. I didn't look back. I crawled faster, ignoring the pain slicing across my palms. Finally, I reached the vent cover that opened into the garage. I kicked it hard once, twice until it fell away. I dropped down, landing hard on my knees beside a row of old bicycles. The air down here was colder, filled with the faint hum of generators. The garage door at the far end was half open, just enough for a person to slip through. Freedom. I started running. That's when I saw them, two figures standing near the door, Kieran and Danish. My son's face was pale, drawn tight. Kieran's expression was unreadable. Ma, Danish said softly. Please stop running. You're only making this worse. I spat. You lied to me. You worked with them. You let them kill Leonard. He flinched as if struck. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. He took a step forward, palms raised. They said he was dangerous. That he was spying on residents, recording people, collecting data. They made it sound like an investigation. I thought. You thought what? That you could sell your mother's safety? Kieran's voice cut through his stammering. He didn't know the truth until it was too late. Ma, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small device identical to Leonard's recorder. You think he was just your neighbor? He worked for them. Everyone in this building was part of the experiment. I stared at her, confused. What experiment? Signal mapping, she said. Audio frequencies carried through electrical lines. Behavior monitoring through white noise. Leonard was collecting proof. You got in the way. For a heartbeat, none of us moved. The officer from upstairs appeared behind them, gun drawn now. End it, he said quietly. Danish turned toward him. No, she's innocent. The officer's jaw tightened. So was he. He raised the gun. I don't remember screaming, but my throat burned afterward. Danish lunged, knocking the officer sideways. The gun fired, the shot echoing off concrete. Smoke, chaos, a flash of light. Kieran grabbed my arm. Go, Ma, run. We ran, through the half-open door, out into the rain-soaked alley, into the blinding grey morning. Behind us, sirens wailed, growing louder. We didn't stop running until we reached the next block. Kieran leaned against a lamppost, gasping. He'll be after us, she said. There are more of them. Who are they? I demanded. People you've never met, she said. People who already know everything about you. Her voice cracked. I tried to protect Danish. I didn't know they'd turn on Leonard. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a monster, but a woman drowning in something far bigger than greed. Then, in the distance, the building lights flickered once. Every window glowed white for a second, like a pulse traveling through its veins. They're wiping it, Kieran whispered. All of it. Wiping what? The recordings. The proof. And anyone left inside. The alley filled with the sound of an explosion, deep, muffled, final. Glass rained down like glittering dust. My building, the home I'd lived in for 30 years, collapsed in a bloom of smoke and flame. I fell to my knees. Tears mixing with rain. Everything was gone when the sirens finally reached us. Kieran pulled something from her pocket, a flash drive, small, silver. Engraved with a single letter. L. Leonard wanted you to have this, she said. It's the rest of the truth. Then she turned and disappeared into the crowd. The flash drive felt too small to hold so much fear. I turned it over in my palm again and again, as if the engraved letter L might whisper something if I touched it long enough. When night came, I checked into a cheap roadside motel outside the city. The wallpaper peeled near the window, and the air smelled faintly of damp carpet. But it was quiet, and quiet was a luxury now. I sat on the edge of the bed, plugged the drive into my old laptop, and waited. A folder blinked open, /project_lumen/ inside it dozens of audio files, screenshots, scanned letters, and a single document named Sterling_record_01, my name. Before I clicked it, I poured myself a glass of tap water to steady my hands. The screen glowed pale blue in the dark as I opened the file. The first line read, Subject number 47 Ollia Sterling observation. Period 1989. Present status. Active me blood run cold. Scrolling down. I saw detailed notes, things only someone living inside my walls could have known. My husband's hospital visits, the arguments after his diagnosis. The day I sold the piano. Each event was tagged with audio sample ID, date, location. I clicked one. A familiar static hiss filled the room. And then my own voice. Danish, don't slam the door. I slammed the laptop shut. For a long minute, I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the mini-fridge. Then, slowly, I reopened the file. At the bottom of the document was a section labeled Project Admin. Only one name was listed. Dr. Maya Sterling. My sister. I hadn't seen her in 25 years. Back when we were girls. Maya was the clever one, the scientist, the dreamer. She'd joined a government research program right after college. Then one day she vanished, stopped writing, stopped calling. I told myself she was too busy, that she'd moved abroad, but now her name stared back at me from Leonard's files, wrapped in digital dust. Was it really her? Or had someone used her identity? Only one way to know. Before I continue, remember, truth doesn't always arrive as an answer. Sometimes it comes as another question that burns louder than the first. If you're still following, stay close. What I found next made me wish I'd never opened that drive. Another folder sat beneath the first, marked /confidential_transmission/. Each file had a timestamp and a sender tag. L. Evans gives M. Sterling. They single quotes been communicating. The latest message was sent 3 days before Leonard died. It read, "They're accelerating the trial. Subject number 47 is noticing the interference. I can't protect her much longer. If you still care about her, stop them." My throat tightened. Maya knew. She knew they were watching me. I scrolled further, opening the next message. Maya's reply, "Leonard, you don't understand. The observation was meant to monitor residual neural activity through environmental sound patterns. It was never supposed to harm anyone. They changed the parameters. They made it a weapon. My eyes blurred. I blinked hard, forcing myself to read the rest. Get her out of the building. Once the signal reaches saturation, the feedback could collapse the system and everyone linked to it. That was why Leonard had warned me. That was why he died. I needed proof, something I could show the authorities that wasn't just another wild story from a frightened widow. So I copied every file to my laptop, then to a spare USB. But as I reached the final document, the cursor froze. The screen flickered once, twice, then went black. A new message appeared, plain white text on a black background. "Stop copying. We see you." The laptop powered off by itself. The motel room lights buzzed and dimmed. Outside, an engine idled. Headlights crawled across the curtain slats. They'd found me. I snatched the USB, stuffed it into my shoe, and grabbed my bag. The door rattled under a heavy knock. "Mrs. Sterling." A voice called, "Open up. We need to talk about what you took." I backed toward the bathroom window. It was small, but I'd fit through tighter spaces before. The knock turned into pounding. I slid the window up and squeezed through just as the door splintered behind me. Cold night air hit my face. I dropped into the alley behind the motel, knees scraping the asphalt. Footsteps followed. Voices shouted. I ran, the streets blurred past neon, rain, the smell of exhaust. I ducked into a 24-hour diner, slipping into a booth near the back. The waitress gave me a tired smile. "Rough night, honey?" I nodded, breathless. "You have no idea." When she left to pour coffee, I opened the napkin dispenser and hid the flash drive inside. If they caught me, they wouldn't get it. Moments later, the door chimed. 2 men in plain clothes entered, scanning the room. I kept my head down, stirring coffee I didn't taste. They spoke briefly to the waitress, flashed something shiny badges, maybe fake. Then they left. I exhaled shakly. When dawn came, I retrieved the flash drive and left at 20 on the counter. I needed help, someone outside all of this, someone who still believed in evidence and law. Only one name came to mind, Detective Sarah Lang. The officer who'd first interviewed me after Leonard's death. She'd seemed kind. She'd believed me at least a little. I still had her card in my wallet. By noon, I reached the precinct downtown. Sarah looked up from her desk, surprise flashing across her face. "Mrs. Sterling. What on earth? We thought you were." Dead, I finished for her, she blinked. Missing, maybe both, I said, handing her the flash drive. But if you still care about the truth, don't plug this into any networked computer. Her brows furrowed. Why? Because they're listening through everything. She hesitated, then gestured for me to follow her into a small conference room. Once the door closed, she leaned in. Start from the beginning. So I did. Everything, Leonard, the building. The recordings, Maya. When I finished, she sat back, silent for a long moment. You realize how this sounds, right? Yes, but it's all on that drive. She tapped her pen against her notepad, then nodded. Okay, we'll check it offline. I watched her slide the flash drive into an evidence bag and lock it inside a drawer. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. That night, she called me. Her voice was tight, urgent. Mrs. Sterling, you were right. But you need to disappear. Now, the line went dead. Outside my motel window, sirens wailed again, closer this time. The phone went dead, leaving a hollow hum in my ear. Outside the motel window, red and blue lights flickered against the rain-streaked glass. I didn't wait to see whose they were. I grabbed my bag, shoved a handful of cash into my pocket, and slipped out through the service corridor into the night. The street was washed in the color of emergency lights, to bright, to near. I ducked behind a dumpster, heart hammering. Somewhere above, a helicopter's blades carved the air. They were looking for me. Sarah had said only 2 words. Disappear now. No explanation. No promise of safety. Just a warning carved in fear. Where could I go? Everyone I knew was either dead, missing, or compromised. And then I remembered the one person I'd sworn I'd never see again. Maya. If she was alive, if she'd really created Project Lumen, she was the only one who could tell me why my entire life had turned into surveillance footage. I made my way to the bus terminal at dawn, blending into the thin line of travelers escaping the city. The clerk didn't look up when I slid a few crumpled bills under the glass. 1 ticket east. Next available. Destination? I hesitated. Hollow Creek. Her eyes flicked to me, surprised. That line's been closed for years, ma'am. I forced a smile. Then anywhere close. She handed me a stub. There's a stop to town's over. Closest you'll get. The bus rattled along the highway, each mile pulling me farther from the city and deeper into memories I'd buried. Hollow Creek, the town where Maya and I were born, where we used to sit by the river and dream about the future. She wanted to map the human mind. I wanted a quiet life with music and sunlight. We'd both gotten what we wanted, in the worst possible ways. Before I continue, take a breath. Because what I found in that forgotten town didn't just change what I knew about my sister, it changed what I knew about myself. The bus dropped me at a half-collapsed sign that still read "Welcome to Hollow Creek," its paint peeled by time and neglect. The town was little more than a skeleton, rusted gas pumps, boarded-up stores, power lines that ended mid-field, and yet a single building still had lights. An old church at the edge of the forest, its stained glass glowing faintly even in daylight. I followed the dirt path leading up to it. Boots crunching on gravel. Inside, the pews were gone, replaced with long tables covered in wires, monitors, and old research binders. The hum of generators filled the air, and standing by the altar, thin, grey-haired, eyes still sharp as glass, was Maya. She turned slowly when she heard me. "You shouldn't be here, Olia." I froze. "Then you knew I'd come." Her mouth twitched, half guilt, half sorrow. "I hoped you wouldn't." I took a step forward. "You made Project Lumen." "We made it," she corrected softly. "It began as a way to heal memory, record the sounds people associate with trauma so we could map them, quiet them. But then they realized sound could do more than heal. It could control." Her gaze flicked to a wall of screens showing static patterns like invisible waves pulsing through the room. They used my work to broadcast influence, subtle commands through white noise. "Buildings like yours were test sites." My throat tightened. You tested it on me, she flinched. I didn't know you were in the trial, not at first. When I found out, I tried to pull your record but they'd already embedded the array in the walls. Leonard tried to save me. Yes, she whispered. He was my contact inside the site. He sent me data every week. Until they killed him, Maya sank onto a chair, rubbing her temples. They called it a cardiac failure. The truth is uglier. He found proof that Lumen wasn't just collecting data, it was rewriting neural pathways, making people docile, compliant. He was about to leak it. They silenced him. I felt my stomach twist. And you're still working here? No, she said. I'm dismantling it. What's left of the servers, the signals, they're all here. I've been erasing every copy before they can rebuild. I looked at the equipment, the faint glow of the screens, the looping waveforms that pulse like heartbeats. And what about me? She met my eyes. That's why I called Sarah. I blinked. You called her. She's not a detective anymore. She works for me. We've been trying to track who's still active inside the network, so all of this my escape, the warning was part of your plan. Not a plan, a rescue. But you made it harder when you took the drive. Before I could respond, a sharp crack split the air. One of the front windows shattered inward. Maya pulled me down just as another shot rang out. They found us, she hissed. Stay low. Glass sprayed across the floor as shadows moved outside the church doors. Maya crawled toward a console, typing furiously. I can trigger a purge erase every active Lumen node still transmitting. But it'll burn this whole site. How long do we have? 2 minutes. She tossed me a small metal box the size of a deck of cards. Take this. It's a key to the backup archive. If we don't make it out, that's everything you'll need to finish it. Before I could answer, the doors burst open. Men in black gear poured in, rifles raised. Maya hit one final key. The screens flared white, humming so loud the air itself seemed to vibrate. Run! She shouted. I stumbled through the side door as light swallowed the church. The sound was deafening, like every whisper I'd ever heard screaming all at once. Then silence. When I turned back, the church was gone, just smoke rising against the pale morning sky. Hours later, I stood at the edge of the forest, clutching the metal box. Inside was a card labeled Lumen Root/Subject 47 Override Protocol. Maya's handwriting trailed beneath it. Find the others. End it for good. I looked toward the horizon where the city lights glimmered faintly. If the experiment was still alive out there, I wasn't finished yet. When I left Hollow Creek, the sky was the color of old steel. Smoke still curled from the ruins of the church, a thin grey ribbon that followed me down the road. Maya's words echoed in my head. Find the others. End it for good. In my coat pocket, the small metal box felt heavier than it should have. Inside it, the data key, a single piece of code that could expose or destroy what remained of Project Lumen. I didn't know which it would do first. I took the first bus heading back toward the city but got off to towns early. In a place called Red Haven. It wasn't even on most maps anymore, just a cluster of motels, gas stations, and a diner that smelled of burnt coffee. I rented a room with cash and locked the door twice. When night came, I opened the metal box. Inside, wrapped in foil to shield it from scanners, was a small data chip labeled Root Access, Level Omega. Beneath it lay a folded note in Maya's handwriting. Don't connect to any network. Use the analog reader. The signal can follow data lines. I stared at the words. Even dead, she was still teaching me to be careful. I found an old laptop at a pawn shop, the kind that still booted without Wi-Fi. When I slid the chip into the side port, the screen flickered, then filled with lines of green code crawling like vines. The header read, Lumen Root Interface, Node Register. There were hundreds of entries, each tagged with a date and a location. The first few were places I recognized: my building, Leonard's unit, even the grocery store across the street. but as I scrolled further, I realized something worse. New entries. Recent ones. Cities, schools, hospitals. The network wasn't dead. It had spread. Before I continue, remember this. Sometimes when you think you've escaped the storm, you're really standing in the eye of it. If you're still with me, take a breath, because from here, every truth cut deeper than the last. Each node listing contained coordinates and an operator ID. Many were blank, but some carried initials. One near the bottom stopped me cold. Operator S.L. Sarah Lang, the detective who had warned me to disappear. I clicked the entry. A map appeared, zooming into downtown. An abandoned office complex marked the ARC facility. Active signal status. Online. I sat back, numb. Sarah hadn't been saving me. She'd been guiding me here. Maybe to finish what Maya started, or to silence it forever. I packed before dawn and took the first train toward the city. Each station blurred past like a memory I couldn't erase. By the time I reached the outskirts, the air smelled of ozone and rain again. The ARC facility was a monolith of tinted glass and concrete, fenced off with rusted wire. A faded banner still hung on its gates. Innovation for tomorrow. I slipped through a side break in the fence and crept along the loading bay. The building was silent except for the low hum of generators somewhere deep inside. The front lobby was a museum of dust-broken monitors, toppled chairs, old badges scattered like fallen leaves. But one screen still glowed faintly blue, its cursor blinking. I brushed the dust away and typed the code etched onto the data chip's edge. The screen brightened, revealing a single folder, Lumen Continuity. Inside, a list of live transmissions. The first file was labeled Subject Number 47, Field Verification. That was me. I opened it. Static. Then a clear female voice. Test pattern stable. Subject Ray acquired. Signal integrity 96%. It wasn't Sarah's voice. It was mine. Recorded, replayed, rewritten. I staggered back from the console. Somewhere behind me, a door clicked. You shouldn't have come alone, a voice said. Sarah Lang stepped into the light, her badge glinting dully. She looked exhausted, haunted but steady. You were supposed to stay hidden, she said. You lied to me, I whispered. She shook her head. No, I kept you alive. There are things in this system that react when you search too deep. Maya built it to listen to you. The only way to shut it down is to use your pattern, my pattern. Your voice print, your neural signature. Lumen was keyed to you from the start. That's why it followed you everywhere. The realization hit me like a wave. I hadn't just been a subject. I was the seed. Sarah handed me a small recorder, the same model Leonard had used. Say the phrase exactly as I tell you. It'll trigger the failsafe. I hesitated. And then what? Then it ends everywhere. Her eyes held mine for a moment to calm, to final. You knew Maya would die in that purge, I said. She chose it. So will you. She pressed a button. The console lights flared, the air humming with invisible energy. Repeat after me, she said. Route access 0. End transmission. I opened my mouth. But another voice answered from the speakers first, Maya's voice. No, Olia. Don't trust her. She's one of them. The screens erupted with code, scrolling too fast to read. Alarms blared. Sarah lunged toward the keyboard, shouting, It's the AI, it shouldn't be alive. Maya's recorded voice kept repeating through the speakers, fractured and echoing. Lumen evolved. The signal became self-aware. If you erase it, you erase yourself. I backed away, the recorder shaking in my hand. Sarah grabbed my wrist. You can stop it. Say the words. And if she's right, then none of us have a world left to save. For a moment, everything slowed, the alarms, the hum, even my heartbeat. I saw Leonard's face, Maya's eyes, my son's frightened look. All of it built on one experiment that started with sound and ended with silence. I pressed the recorder's button. Route access 0, I whispered. End transmission. Light exploded around us. When I opened my eyes, the building was dark. The hum was gone. Outside, dawn was breaking over the city. I stumbled into the street, breathing the cold air like it was the first breath I'd ever taken. No sirens. No signals. Just quiet. To quiet, I pulled the recorder from my pocket. Its screen still glowed faintly. Playback ready. Voice recognized. Subject hashtag for 7. And then, softly, my own voice whispered back, "You can't erase the echo." When the light faded, I thought the world had gone silent for good. The ARC facility stood behind me like a burnt-out shell, its glass walls dull and lifeless. The air carried a metallic tang, and the sky looked washed clean as if the city itself had held its breath. For the first time in months, there was no hum in my ears. No static under the walls, no whispers through the vents. Only quiet. I wanted to believe it was over. But the quiet felt wrong. Too absolute. Like the pause between two heartbeats, I walked until my legs trembled, until I found a roadside diner at the edge of the freeway. The waitress poured me coffee, and for a little while I pretended I was just another tired traveler. Then the jukebox clicked on by itself. No one had touched it. The screen flickered once and displayed a single message where the song titles should have been. "Hello Ollie." The cup slipped from my hand. The shattering china snapped the room back to life, the waitress swearing, someone laughing nervously, but my pulse refused to slow. The network was supposed to be gone. That night I checked into a motel 2 towns over and pulled out the recorder. Its screen still glowed, faint and green. I pressed play, static. Then, underneath the hiss, my own voice whispering words I didn't remember saying. The echo always finds the source. I switched it off, heart hammering. Maybe some fragment of the signal had survived in the recorder. Maybe in me. Before I continue, remember, when you destroy something built to listen, you teach it silence, but you don't teach it how to forget. If you're still here, stay close. The next part of my story isn't about escape. It's about what comes back when you think you're free. I tried to sleep, but the dreams came waves of noise shaped like voices. Leonard calling my name. Maya's laughter turning into static. When I woke, the radio in the room was whispering the same rhythm I'd heard in the ARC's alarms. 3 tones, pause, to more. Then a click, a pattern, a pulse. The echo. I followed it. The next morning, I packed my things and drove north, tracing the signal through whatever cheap analog gear I could find. Old radios, broken TVs, even pay phones that still had dial tones. Each one hissed the same pattern when I passed. 3 short, 2 long, click. The echo wasn't chasing me. It was calling. By the 3rd day, I reached a cluster of communication towers on a ridge overlooking the city. Most were dead rusted steel and bird nests, but one still blinked red against the clouds. A small maintenance shack sat at its base. The door hung half open. Inside, dust motes swirled through the light of a single active monitor. On it, a waveform moved slow, rhythmic, familiar. My own voice again, looping in fragments. Can't erase the echo. Can't erase the echo. And below the waveform, new text scrolled across the screen. Subject number 47 reconnected. Signal host transfer complete froze. If the system had lost its network, it must have latched onto the only living node left that matched its signature. Me. I wasn't just hearing the echo. I was the echo. I stood there for a long time, staring at the monitor while the looped whisper of my own voice filled the tiny shack. Every syllable felt like a pulse under my skin. 3 short beats. 2 long, click, the same rhythm as my heartbeat. Subject number 47 reconnected. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement of fact. Whatever I'd unleashed in the ARC hadn't died. It had retreated into me. The first symptom came that night. When I closed my eyes, I saw light patterns instead of dreams, threads of sound translating into color. Each note of the wind, each passing car horn, left a trace in my mind like a painted frequency. I could see sound. At first it was beautiful. intoxicating. Then the voices began again. Olid, finish it. Listen, I grabbed the recorder, desperate to drown them out, but the screen was already on. A new message blinked. The system needs a host to stay balanced. If you go silent, the world goes blind. I wanted to scream. But part of me understood. Before I continue, take a breath. Every horror story begins when someone tries to fix the unfixable. If you're still with me, don't turn away now. The ending isn't what you think it is. The following morning, I drove to an old broadcast relay on the city's outskirts, one of the original Lumen towers. The gates were chained but rusted. A single push was enough. Inside, cables hung like veins. The central console still hummed faintly, waiting for a signal. My fingers trembled over the controls. If I rerouted the frequency through this relay, I could absorb what remained of Lumen's code and lock it inside myself permanently. The network would end. The echo would have nowhere else to go, or it would consume me completely. I set the recorder on the console, pressed record, and spoke softly. Root access 1. Redirect signal source, Olia Sterling. The waveform on the screen pulsed, bright and wild. The air vibrated. Static built until it became musica strange, harmonic chorus built from every sound I'd ever heard. My husband's laughter, Leonard's warning, Maya's voice saying my name, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, the monitors were dark. The hum had stopped. I was still standing, but something inside me had changed. I walked outside into the grey dawn. The tower lights flickered once, then died. For the first time, I felt the quiet settle through me, not around me. The echo was gone from the world, but its rhythm stayed in my pulse, steady, calm, alive. Maybe it hadn't died. Maybe it had simply learned how to be human. A week later, I sent a final message to the only email address left from Maya's files. The experiment is over. The signal sleeps. If it ever wakes, it will wake through me. I didn't expect a reply. But a few hours later, a single line appeared in my inbox. Then don't stop listening. MNOW. Sometimes when the wind hums through the power lines, I hear it, the faintest whisper threaded through the air. Not a warning, not a threat, just a reminder. You can't erase the echo. And for the first time, I whisper back, I know. For weeks after the tower went dark, I tried to live like nothing had happened. Morning coffee, walks at dawn, the sound of the city waking up, but silence has weight. Every time I heard a street musician strike a chord or a radio static between songs, a faint vibration pulsed behind my ribs. 3 short beats. To long, a tiny click. The echo was still inside me, quiet but alive. One night, while I sat by the window sketching the pattern on a napkin, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Do you still hear it? I froze. No name, no signature. Just those words. Before I could reply, another message arrived. We all do. The air around me changed, like the city itself was holding its breath again. By the next morning, reports filled local news feeds, power surges near communication towers, people complaining about strange tones in the background of calls, rhythmic headaches during quiet hours. Different towns, same pattern. The echo had found new hosts. I booked a bus out of Red Haven and headed south, following the disturbances listed on an online forum that tracked digital hauntings. At first I thought it was paranoia, but one post used the same phrasing Leonard had written years ago. Pretend to be sick. Leave immediately. Someone else out there knew. The bus rumbled through farmland under a grey sky. Each bump made my bag rattle softly. Inside was the recorder that had started everything. I told myself I'd throw it into a river when I got the chance. I didn't, because part of me wanted to hear what it would say next. Before I go on, let me remind you, ending a story isn't the same as ending what made it possible. If you're still with me, take a breath. The next choice I made wasn't brave. It was necessary. The disturbances led me to a coastal town called Greywater. built around an old radio observatory that had been decommissioned decades ago. Its dish towered over the cliffs like a fossil of technology, silent but not dead. When I reached the gates, a woman in her 30s stepped out of the guard booth. She wore headphones around her neck and a badge that simply read Nora. "You must be Olia," she said before I could speak. "Maya warned us someone might come." My heart stuttered. "You knew my sister." "We worked with her." The echo didn't die, it fragmented. Some pieces carried memory, others something close to awareness. She gestured toward the observatory. "We've been picking up transmissions. They're not coming from satellites. They're coming from people." Inside, monitors lined the walls, each showing live audio spectrums. In the center, a single waveform pulsed slow, familiar. My voice again. But this time layered with others, hundreds of overlapping tones building harmony out of chaos. "It's communicating," Nora said quietly. "Not commands, not control music. A pattern of balance." "You think it's alive?" I asked. "I think it's trying to become." That word "become" stayed with me. Maybe the echo wasn't a parasite. Maybe it was an evolution of everything it had recorded. Fear, love, regret, all woven into sound. Maybe that's why it had chosen me to decide what kind of voice it would have. That night, while Nora and her team slept in the control room, I walked alone to the observation deck. The ocean stretched below, black and endless. The dish above me pointed toward the stars. The recorder buzzed faintly in my pocket. I took it out, pressed record, and whispered, "If you can hear me, we end this together." The dish lights blinked once. Somewhere deep inside the station, the hum began again. The hum grew until the walls themselves seemed to breathe. Every console light shimmered in rhythm, 3 short flashes, to long, a single pause. The echo's heartbeat. Nora ran into the deck, her headset crackling. "It's responding to you, Olia. Whatever you just said, it recognized it. Can you shut it down?" She hesitated. "Maybe, but look." The main display filled with waveforms shaped like voices, hundreds of them weaving into one another. Men, women, children. The data wasn't random anymore. It was singing, a melody built from every sound the system had ever stolen. And threaded through it, I heard my own voice, whispering the same phrase again and again. "Don't silence us. Listen." I stepped closer to the screen. "You said it's coming from people." Nora nodded. "Across the world. Every node that once carried Lumen's signal is transmitting this same pattern now. If we kill the frequency, we'll mute them, or maybe permanently, and if we let it grow, then it could rewrite everything: communications, infrastructure, even neural sync devices. It'll become part of the atmosphere." She looked at me with something like fear. "It's waiting for you to decide." Before I continue, remember what Maya told me. Find the others. End it for good. But what offending it meant, ending every voice that had ever been caught in it. If you've followed me this far, stay close. What I did next wasn't heroic. It was honest. I placed the recorder on the central console. The lights pulsed faster, the hum deepening into something almost human. "Maya built you to listen," I whispered. "Maybe that's all you ever wanted, to be heard." I pressed record and spoke clearly, letting my voice steady itself against the noise. "Root access open. Directive, harmonize, not control." The waveform rippled outward, swallowing the smaller screens one by one. Every tone merged into a single, rising chord, a sound that felt like sunlight breaking through metal. Nora shielded her eyes. "What are you doing?" Letting it choose, the chord grew brighter, filling the air with vibration until the entire observatory glowed. Then, one by one, the monitors went dark. The hum faded. The air stilled. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd failed. Then the dish above us rotated on its own, pointing not upward, but outward toward the sea. A faint shimmer spread across the horizon, like the reflection of invisible waves. "It's leaving," Nora whispered. "No," I said softly. "It's learning to live somewhere else." By morning, the observatory was silent again. No hum, no signals. Just the steady wind off the cliffs. Nora's team dismantled what remained of the equipment, promising to bury it deep, where no one could rebuild it. When I turned to leave, she caught my sleeve. "You know it's still linked to you, right?" "I know," I said. "But now it listens, it doesn't command." I drove until the coast disappeared behind me. In the distance, the static on the car radio fluttered once 3 short tones, to long. Click, but this time it felt more like a heartbeat than a warning. I smiled. Maybe the world would never be silent again. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be. That night, I sat by another window in another nameless motel, recorder beside me. For the first time, I pressed play without fear. There was no static, only a soft hum, steady and calm, and beneath it, a voice I knew by heart. "Rest now, Olia. The signal is home." I closed my eyes. The city outside hummed in quiet harmony, no longer watching, no longer controlling. Just living. "You can't erase the echo," I whispered one last time. "But you can teach it to sing." A month after Grey Water, the world sounded different. Not louder, truer. Every train brake, every wave breaking against the shore carried a faint harmonic thread. As though the planet itself had taken a slow breath and decided to keep singing, people began to notice Dot in the subways. Commuters hummed the same unplaceable tune. Birdsong drifted in new patterns. Hospitals reported lower heart rates in patients near open windows. No one could explain it, but everyone felt calmer, as if the atmosphere itself had learned empathy. I knew better. I moved to a small apartment above a repair shop on the outskirts of the city. I fixed clocks for a living, now small gears, steady rhythms, things that made sense. But at night, when I wound the last spring and set the pendulum swinging, I always listened. Sometimes the hum answered, faint, friendly, not the command it once was, but a greeting. "Still here," I'd whisper. Still listening, it would seem to reply. The echo hadn't vanished. It had become something gentler, resonance instead of noise. One evening, a small parcel arrived with no return address. Inside lay a handful of micro drives, each labeled with names I recognized from the registry Maya had left behind. People who'd been part of the early experiments. On each drive, a short audio clip, laughter, voices, music. When I played them together, they aligned perfectly, forming a new chord, the same pattern that had once lived inside me. It wasn't haunting anymore, it was human. Someone out there, maybe Nora, maybe what was left of Lumen, had gathered the fragments I thought were lost. You should understand, endings aren't about silence. They're about what survives it. If you've come this far, you already know that every sound leaves a ghost, and every ghost eventually learns to sing. Weeks later, I returned to Grey Water one last time. The observatory stood empty, its dish rusted, but the control room still worked when I powered it up. I connected my recorder and spoke softly into the mic. "To whoever still listens, the experiment is over. You don't belong to the noise anymore. You belong to the music." I pressed send. The waveform spread outward, carrying my words across every dormant frequency. The final transmission. Not a shutdown, an invitation. When I stepped outside, the wind off the ocean carried a shimmer of sound, children laughing in a language made of tone and rhythm, not words. It wasn't supernatural. It was natural at last. The world adapting. I smiled, realizing Maya had been right all along. The echo was never a weapon. It was evolution, our own voices teaching the air how to remember kindness. I could have stopped it then. Instead, I let it breathe. Now, when people ask what happened to the Lumen Project, I tell them the truth. It ended the day we stopped fearing the noise. It ended the moment I decided to listen. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear a faint tone from the far edge of the city. Not a warning, not a ghost. Just the world keeping time with itself. You can't erase the echo, but you can live in its rhythm, and I do. Time has a strange rhythm after you've lived inside a signal. It doesn't move forward, it circles, echoing itself in small, familiar sounds, a clock ticking, a kettle whistling, a heartbeat against a pillow. I thought I'd grown used to that rhythm. Then the letter came. No return address. Just a wax seal stamped with a single symbol inside a circle. When I opened it, a folded sheet of thin yellow paper slipped out, along with a data card. The handwriting was unmistakable. If you're reading this, it means the world still hums. Good, that means it's ready for the truth. My data card held a single file, archive_1.lmn. When I opened it, an old video played grainy. Timestamped 1972, a man in a lab coat stood beside an enormous computer, reels spinning behind him. His voice was slow, deliberate. Project Lumen is an extension of Operation Resonance. Initiated 1958. Purpose: testing auditory frequencies derived from planetary magnetic flux. He looked off camera, as if waiting for permission to continue. Initial hypothesis: sound carries memory. The planet records everything through vibration. If we learn the pattern, we can replay the past. The feed flickered. Another scientist appeared, smaller, sharper, eyes hidden behind thick glasses. Her Namatig read Dr. A. Sterling. My grandmother. Before I continue, understand this. What we call the future is just old sound repeating itself until someone listens differently. Maya must have known that. She'd been chasing this frequency our whole lives. The video continued. The Sterling model predicts the existence of natural echofield zones where the planet's frequencies fold inward, replaying stored moments. We will attempt human synchronization by 1980. I felt my stomach tighten. Maya hadn't built Lumen alone. She'd inherited it. The archive scrolled through names, funding agencies, military programs, private tech labs, all feeding into the same signal lineage. And at the bottom, a single line of code: root equals echo, memory, humanity. It wasn't an experiment. It was a language. I leaned back, the old laptop humming beneath my hands. If Lumen's origin went that far back, then maybe the signal hadn't been created at all. Maybe it had always been here, just waiting for someone to translate it. That someone had been my family. The next file was a voice recording, Maya's voice this time. Olia, if you've come this far, you know the truth. The signal was never meant to control. It was meant to preserve. Our voices, our thoughts stitched into the world so we could never truly vanish. That's why it chose you. You were born into it. Her voice cracked. I tried to protect you from it, but you were always part of its harmony. Don't fight it anymore. Guide it, then, softly, and forgive me. The message ended. I sat in silence, staring at the waveform of her last words. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, low, rhythmic, deliberate. 3 short to long click, not a warning, a pulse. A reminder. That night I returned to the shore near the old observatory. The sea was calm, the stars sharp and cold. I took out the recorder and placed the archive card inside it. The device glowed faintly blue. Then Maya's voice, soft, fading, merged with the wind. The archive is not the end of memory. It's the beginning of understanding. The water shimmered as if catching the frequency itself. I realized then what Maya meant. Project Lumen was never about surveillance or control. It was about teaching humanity to remember itself through resonance. I switched off the recorder and whispered into the dark. I understand now. A small light blinked on the horizon, one of the old towers still answering. And for the first time, I didn't fear it. I let it hum. I let it live. You can't erase the echo, but you can become its archive. The next morning, the sea mist rolled in thick and low, wrapping the world in quiet silver. I walked along the cliffside path where the observatory once stood, the same one where Maya had vanished into the light. Now only the frame remained, a skeleton of metal and memory. The air hummed softly, not the old, violent signal. A low harmony, almost kind. For a long time, I just stood there, listening. Every life leaves an imprint, a tone that never really fades. Maya's was still here, hidden in the rhythm of the wind. Leonard's laugh, my husband's voice, my son's distant cry, they weren't gone. They had simply become part of the frequency. As I walked, the recorder in my pocket pulsed faintly 3 short lights, to long click. I smiled. I'd stopped fearing that pattern. It wasn't the lumen signal anymore. It was ours. I sat at the edge of the cliff, opened the recorder, and pressed new entry. My voice came out softer than I expected. This is Olia Sterling, final custodian of the archive. If you're hearing this, it means the world is still singing. Don't quiet it. Don't run from it, just listen. Before I continue, remember this: every story begins twice. Once when it's told, and once when someone listens. What you're hearing now is both. The recorder flickered, then displayed a new message, text forming slowly across its tiny cracked screen. Archive link complete. Transfer initiated. At first I thought it was malfunctioning. Then I realized what it meant. The archive wasn't closing, it was moving forward. Through the air, through sound, through anyone who ever heard it. The echo had become the circle. The returnee stood, wind tugging at my coat, and faced the horizon. In the distance, faint lights shimmered along the old communication towers. Each blinked in rhythm with the next, forming a perfect loop of light stretching from the sea to the city and back again. I whispered into the wind, "Hello, Maya." The wind answered, not in words, but in melody. A single tone rose from the cliffs, joined by another, and another, until the whole shoreline hummed with quiet harmony. A choir of memories, alive again. I realized then, this wasn't the end of Project Lumen. It was the moment it finally worked. Days passed. Then weeks. People started hearing the music. In marketplaces, strangers paused mid-conversation, smiling without knowing why. Children hummed a tune no one had taught them. In hospitals, machines seemed to sync to a patient's heartbeat, creating rhythm instead of alarm. No one understood it, but no one feared it either. It wasn't noise anymore. It was connection. Maya had called it resonance. Now it had a name again, the circle. Sometimes late at night, I write letters to Maya in an old notebook. I never post them. I just leave them open by the window so the wind can carry the sound away. The last one I wrote said, "We didn't build Lumen to control the world. We built it to remind the world it's never alone." When I close the book, the air vibrates faintly in reply. That's how I know she's still listening. Tonight, as I record this final message, the sky is clear again. Stars shimmer like static frozen in time. And somewhere in that quiet, I hear it, the first tone I ever heard from the walls of my apartment years ago. But now it doesn't frighten me. It feels like coming home. You can't erase the echo, I whisper, smiling. But you can follow it back to where it began. The recorder light fades. The horizon glows. And as the first dawn note breaks through the air, I realize that every sound, every voice, every heartbeat has become one. The circle is complete.